Hear the word of God from 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 16 through 18. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. For several years, I saved up and really looked forward to and really wanted one particular Christmas present. This was about 20 years ago. I wanted to get one of those little teeny tiny, this is before the internet, youth and children. I wanted to get one of these teeny tiny portable TVs that I could take with me anywhere I went. I could take it with me to a football game and watch an instant replay. I could take it with me when I went camping, or I could take it with me when I went out of town on a trip. And it had these antennas, and you could pick up a signal. And so I saved up for it, and I looked forward to it. And finally, one Christmas, about 20 years ago, I bought this thing, and I was so excited. And I used it for a few years. I probably used it about 3 times. And then they came up with this thing that scrambled my signal. So this analog TV is basically worthless now. You can't hook up a cable to it, so it's just trash. So I had to take this thing that I had saved up for and thought about and longed for so many years and just throw it away. It was unusable. Times change. And things that we think are so useful and important sometimes are not so important. You used to have one of these telephones that you dialed up. And it was so neat to have a dial-up telephone. You know, my wife lived in a place in Indian Land, South Carolina, where you had party lines. And you didn't even have your own line. And at least you could have your own line with this dial-up telephone thing. And it was really neat having this dial-up telephone. Today, you can't use a dial-up telephone. You know, it's, or at least I can't, not in my house, not the way my phones are plugged in. Times change. The importance of communication still remains. The importance of seeing news and seeing broadcasts still remain, but the methods that you use change. And so it is true with the church. The old story is still the most important story that you can have. The most important story that needs to be communicated. But the methods of communication and the tools we use to communicate these stories do change. Whether we like it or not, we need to be able to communicate the old story in new ways. And so the mail-out newsletter that we used to have here is no longer mailed out. We found that half of the newsletters we were mailing out were not getting to the right place. And so we emailed things, which they have problems with emails too. But times change, and how we communicate the old story changes. But what Paul says in this passage is very important for us. We need a new church. The church needs to be renewed every day. We need to think about how we can scrape off the old and plug into the new every day. And that's what Paul says here. He says, outwardly we are wasting away, but inwardly we're being renewed every day. How do you get a new church? It's not by simply new programs. It's not by simply new buildings, so that can be a part of it. It's not simply by changing the exterior of the paint or the carpet or the colors. All that is really secondary. How do you get a new faith? It all starts on the inside. And that really is Jesus' message. When he came, he talked about it's not all the exterior stuff that matters. It's what's on the inside. You need a new heart, and you need new eyes so you can see things in new, important, faith, God-like ways. And that's what he said in this passage. First, we need a new heart. That's the most important thing. He says, we do not lose heart. We do not despair. We do not give up. We do not lose heart for the cause of Jesus Christ. There are many other causes you need to give up on. Like I gave up at the second half last night. But there is a cause that you never give up on, and that is God's cause. Though sometimes it may look like you're losing, we know who wins in the end with God. So do not lose heart. Do not give up. But let your heart be renewed day by day. Don't coast on what you used to learn in Sunday school or what you heard once or twice in church, but always seek to grow in your heart, in your love for God, in your love for neighbor. Look for ways to renew your heart day by day, Paul says. I saw Susan Mullis today, and I thought about her granddaughter, Catherine Ann, who for about 8 months we wondered if she was going to live or die because her little teeny baby heart was not working. And there were about three different things that were wrong with it, and so she got on this artificial Berlin heart and had to get that changed a couple of times. And it was touch and go for so long, and we were praying as a congregation for her and for them. And how exciting it was when on September 20th, she got a new heart, a heart transplant. And it just gave her new energy and new life and a new hope for the whole family. When you become a Christian, when you really take God seriously in your heart, not just on the exterior by showing up in church every blue moon or showing up reading the Bible every blue moon, but when you really take God seriously on the inside, it gives you new hope. It gives you freedom from the things that bind you. It sets you free. Do not lose heart, but let your heart be renewed every day, Paul says. And then he talks about seeing things differently. When your heart is changed, you look at things differently through a new set of glasses, the glasses of faith. You look at problems differently, and you look at life differently. You look at problems differently. He says, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So what does he say about our problems? He says, our problems here on this earth. Now, this was a guy who had been in prison, who'd been beaten, who'd been shipwrecked, who'd been left for dead, stoned, arrested falsely, beaten. He called these light and momentary problems. He says about our problems 3 things. He says that they are light, he says that they're momentary, and that they achieve something. They are light. If you could weigh our problems against the joy that will be before us, the problems would not outweigh the joy. Now, when you're in the midst of problems, you may not believe that. You may think, oh, there is no joy that can compensate for the pain and the grief and the problems and the heartache I'm going through. But believe me, have faith. Have faith that God's good is greater than any evil you may experience. Think about the cross. The cross was a terrible, horrible, rotten, worst thing that could happen in life, where an innocent man, the best man, was arrested, falsely beaten, crucified, crown of thorns, spit on, mocked. But compare the cross and it's 2 hours, 2 days of pain and shame, to the resurrection, and they do not outweigh each other. The resurrection far outweighs the cross, and the importance of God far outweighs the worst that humans can do. Our problems are light compared to glory. In terms of importance, in terms of time, it is momentary. 10 years of trouble and sickness and disease do not outweigh an eternity of renewal and life and hope. And they achieve something. There was a theologian named Edward Dowdy in the Presbyterian Church that said, this whole life is like a school. God is teaching us all throughout life, shaping us and molding us and teaching us more and more about him if we will listen to him. He compared it like a sharpening stone. You know, we can hit the axe against the sharpening stone and become dull if you blame God for your problems. Or you can use your problems as a sharpening stone to make you a better person, shaped and molded. A school, if you will. Life is like a school. You know, I hate school in so many ways. I like school, but I hate school. You know, I would not go back to college and live in that little teeny tiny dorm room. I wondered how I did that. I guess I was young and just didn't know any better, and I was so excited to be with other people and away from my parents or something. And eat that terrible cafeteria food and stay up all night studying. I would not trade that for where I am today. But it was something that I needed to go through to achieve something better later on. Life in so many ways is like a school where God is trying to get our attention and to teach us something. Dr. Brand called pain as an alarm clock, and he said pain is like a way that God tries to wake us up to what he's trying to teach us in life. And pain can be a blessing, just like if you touch a hot stove, it's a blessing to know that it's hot. Because if you don't know that it's hot, you leave your hand there and your hand becomes scalded. Pain can be a blessing, an alarm clock to wake us up that something's wrong or something's right. So Paul is able to say our problems, it's a way of seeing, it's a way of looking at life. When your heart is different, you look at things a little different. Our problems are light and momentary, and they are achieving something. They are a school for us. He says our outward bodies are wasting away, but inwardly we're being renewed every day. That's a great statement. You know, Paul was older when he wrote this, and his outward body was wasting away. He had broken bones and bruises and probably had arthritis with no medicine. Outwardly, he was wasting away, but inwardly, he was being renewed. And you know, that's what the aging process does for us. You know, most of us will start going downhill after about 20 years old. You know, your body it reaches its peak at like 20. If you live to 80, you got 3/4 of your life just kind of going downhill from there. You know your brain reaches its peak size when you're 20 years old, and after that you start losing brain mass. If you're 24-year-old, you're saying, I'm losing brain mass. 3/4 of your life, you've reached your peak of speed, your peak of reaction time, your peak of strength, and you're kind of going from there on experience. And I believe, in part, it's that way because God wants to tell us, don't focus on the outward physical things because they're not going to last. They peaked when you were 20. And you've got 3/4 of your life to figure out it's not all about beauty and strength and smartness. It's about what's in here. It's about your heart. Outwardly, we're being wasted away, but inwardly, we're being renewed day by day. And then he talks about, that's a way of looking at our problems. And he talks about a way of looking at life. We have new eyes. God gives us new eyes when our heart is renewed, a way of looking at life through the eyes of faith. And he says to fix your eyes, not on what is seen, not on the exterior things, but what is unseen. How do you do that? How do you fix your eyes on what is unseen? We do it all the time. We do it all the time. You know, when my wife is not in the room, just because I don't see her doesn't mean I don't think about her. It doesn't mean I'm not listening to what she told me I ought to do a few minutes before. We used to live in the mountains, and if you're driving around some of those mountain curves and you look down over the edge, it can be a mighty far drop down there. It's a steep drop. But you know, when you're driving, you don't look down. You look ahead. You fix your eyes on the road. If you're a tightrope walker, you don't look down. You look at the rope. If you're a mountain climber, you don't look down till you get to the top. And so in this life, Paul is saying, fix your eyes on what's important. Don't look down at all the secondary exterior things, but focus on what is going to last and is eternal and is unseen. Love and grace and God. It's a new way of seeing when you believe. The world needs people who are not narcissistic, people who are not navel gazers. The world does not need a church that's all concerned about itself. The world does not need a church that is all concerned with its own comfort, with the exterior comforts of the church. The world does not need a church that is simply concerned about the interior but not concerned about the world outside and the community outside and the next generation to come. But the world desperately needs a church that knows how to love neighbor, that knows how to think about the next generation to come, that needs to think about what's going to come down the pike. You know why the mainline churches are dying out? There are many different philosophies about why the mainline churches are dying out today, the Lutherans, Episcopalians, Presbyterians, even the Baptists. Well, you know, it's really very simple. They're not reproducing. Last year in the Presbyterian church, 4 times as many churches were dissolved as were started. We only started 17 churches in the whole country last year, and we closed 83. So, you know, you can't do that and expect to continue to prosper and to bear fruit and to grow. It just doesn't happen automatically. If you're just focused on your own comfort and on your own present time, it will not happen. And when we look back at the history of our church, there was a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of sacrifice, and a lot of people who were concerned not just about their own comfort, but about making the church go. And a church is only as good as the people who are willing to sacrifice to make it go, whose heart is right, who don't look at the exterior things, but are looking at how to reach out to neighbor and reach out to love other people and reach out to the next generation. And that's what we are called to do, I believe. I believe it. Not just Lake Murray Presbyterian, but every church is called to be renewed in our heart every day. To not just focus on our problems in this life, but to focus on what is unseen in the world to come and the next generation, the children to come. telling other people about what is really, really, really important in life. That's what we are about. That's why we are a new church being renewed every day. That's what we need to be about. Amen. Oh, you know what? That's not amen. Not amen. Not amen. I forgot one of the most important points. I said this a few years ago. There was a group of church folks called the Shakers. The Shakers were an exciting group to be with because it was a church that danced. They shook things up. But you know what? They were only concerned for their moment and for their comfort and for their people. They started a church in Kentucky, a big commune of Shakers. And you know what? They did not believe in having children. In fact, they absolutely discouraged their members having relations with each other so they might have children. So you can bet what's happened to the Shaker Church in Kentucky today? It's gone. It's dead. Because they only focused on their pleasure, on their worship at that moment. We are called to focus not just on the here and now and our pleasure and our worship and our moment. We're called to focus on how we can reproduce our faith and to bear fruit for Jesus Christ. Now, amen.